The hit Netflix television anthology series Love, Death, and Robots got its name from its core themes. Many episodes explore love, emotional bonds, romance, and passion, while simultaneously showcasing violence and bringing forth existential questions of mortality. And while not every single episode focuses on robots, it does focus on the future, whether it be the struggle to change the future or our common human trait to overly depend on technology. Love, Death, and Robots is a love letter to all forms of animation, an often underappreciated art form. The anthology series showcases some of the best short stories that I have ever seen on screen, but that's not to say there are no lackluster episodes. That is what we are talking about today, with a full ranking of every single episode from Love, Death, and Robots. Why, hello! I'm Jack Brunót, and I talk all things art and entertainment, not just TV shows. But today, we are talking about such an underrated show, especially within the animation sphere, Love, Death, and Robots. In my Black Mirror episode ranking, I got a bunch of requests to do this series, and fortunately enough, I was already a fan. And with the release of a new season, I'm going to be tackling the difficult task of ranking all 44 episodes. When making this list, I realized my favorite episodes were the ones that were able to tell a full story with complex characters and motives within a short amount of time, especially the ones with some nice twists and turns. And don't get me wrong, beautiful animation definitely cannot hurt the episode. However, many of the episodes focused on the art form of animation over anything else, it seems. And that's perfectly okay if that's your thing, but I'm much more of a fan of complex storytelling. And there is a lot of slop, maybe you could call it filler, in the series. Pretty much every episode is either terrible or phenomenal, and there's not much middle ground. However, almost all of them have beautiful and creative animation, and that will of course play a part in the ranking. Like Black Mirror, I do not think every single episode is worth watching, so you could use this video as a guide to figuring out what to watch, and because of that, there will be no spoilers in this video. From what I've seen online, I do think I'm going to have some hot takes, but I want to make it clear that this is a subjective ranking. I don't think there is a true objective way to make a list like this. So I would love to hear what your opinions are of my list and your own personal lists in the comments. If you end up liking what you see here, subscribing and clicking the bell really does go a long way for me. But if you're new here, make sure to say hello in the comments with your personal ranking. I post a video every other week, and some of the other topics I talk about are music, books, video games, and movies, but also other videos about TV shows. And if you're more interested in those, there will be a link in the description to a playlist. So as a wise young rapper once said, Esketit. There are a lot of episodes that I don't have much to say about, especially near the bottom of the list, so I might cruise through some of these. At number 44, at the very bottom of the episode ranking, is Life Hutch. This is the episode with Michael B. Jordan, and it very much just feels like they were trying to find an excuse to put him in an episode. Life Hutch is mind-numbingly pointless. It is simply one long fight scene. And there are a few episodes like this, but a lot of them, at least, show their value or have a point or plot at least. Life Hutch is about an astronaut who seeks refuge in a life pod in space, only to face a malfunctioning robot. Get it? Because robot, Love, Death, and Robot. Yeah, I do think this episode does kind of highlight the over-dependence on technology, but there are many other episodes that cover that exact same topic and do it better. This one is definitely a snooze fest. Not worth watching. Next, I am putting Suits. I specifically don't like this episode because the animation reminds me of a cheap mobile game ad. I mean, it is literally that animation style. You're also going to see a general theme that I don't love the monster episodes in the series. There are some that hit hard, for sure. This ain't one of them. The episode Suits follows farmers in mech suits defending their home from an alien invasion. I wouldn't necessarily say this episode is like bad. When I said this series has slop, I don't necessarily mean it's all just like egregious garbage, but I do think there's just a lot of like, what was the point of this episodes. However, some episodes, even the episodes like this, do have somewhat of a point to it. I think Suits highlights community resistance and the lengths of which humans are willing to go to protect their own. But that animation style, Now we have Ice Age. Here we go. This is one of 2 episodes that are technically live action, but have what I would assume is CGI. So it's more exploring the powers of CGI as opposed to actual traditional animation. I know CGI is technically animation, but you get my point, I think. A couple, one of which is Topher Grace, find a miniature civilization in their freezer. That's about it. There's not much to it. I couldn't exactly put it any higher. Also, the acting to me felt a little off. It's almost like the couple was high throughout the entire thing, which, considering they found a miniature civilization in their freezer, I guess could be canon. Makes a little bit of sense. Next, at 41, we have The Dump. A junkyard resident fights his eviction with his unusual trash pet. Another running theme that you see throughout Love, Death, and Robots is, I guess, childlike humor. And if that's your thing, no offense, by all means. We all have different senses of humor. But this is one of those episodes that tries so hard to be funny, and for me, it just did not hit. I also didn't really like the aesthetic. The animation style of The Dump is an animation style that we see a couple of times throughout the series, and generally I didn't like it in any implementation. It just looks very ugly. I understand that that was probably the point. I mean, after all, this episode is called The Dump, but I'm making a ranking list, so this is how it's gonna be. Next, I put Can't Stop, which was the opener for season 4. This episode felt like such a waste. All this is a Red Hot Chili Peppers music video, except they're puppets. And it's not even for a new song, it's for a song that's been out for many, many years. The song Can't Stop. I had a Red Hot Chili Peppers phase, and I do still like a good amount of their songs, but I mean, in the year 2025, are we really still platforming Anthony Kiedis? You know, after we've learned some things about the dude. Whatever. I also think this was a waste of talent for David Fincher, the director of the episode. David Fincher is a prolific film director. He's worked on some of my favorite films like Fight Club, Gone Girl, The Social Network, and my favorite of his, Seven. So this isn't exactly his best work. The animation is cool, I guess, but it's just a music video. This is one of a couple of episodes that could have just been a YouTube video. Call me a hater, I don't care. Speaking of episodes that should have just been a YouTube video, we have Night of the Mini Dead. This is what I believe to be a claymation or maybe a figurine animation episode of a zombie apocalypse. That's it. Next, we have Close Encounters of the Mini Kind. This is a sequel to Night of the Mini Dead, which I don't really know why we needed. There were a bunch of sequels in season 4, many of which were from episodes that didn't really need sequels, or I mean deserve sequels. Close Encounters of the Mini Kind is the exact same thing, except it's an alien invasion this time. Except with this one, if you think really hard, you could somewhat see a point to the narrative here. The episode is a satirical take on humanity's tendency to overreact and wage war. This episode, along with many in season 4, seemed to focus way more on the prowess of animation as opposed to creating an actual well-rounded short story. So either one of 2 things happened here. Either the creator of Love, Death, and Robots is starting to not understand why people come to the series in the first place, or they had a massive budget cut, or maybe it's both. Next, we have Sucker of Souls. An archaeological expedition unleashes a bloodthirsty demon, leading to a fight for survival. Boo. This episode had such potential. The animation style is so unique and beautiful, yet the writing and the acting, maddening. So this is a brutal episode. This bloodthirsty demon is tearing their team apart, and the characters cannot do anything but laugh about it. There was this one guy who had his head ripped off, and another character was like, that's crazy. This episode genuinely made me mad, so if it wasn't for the animation style, I would have put it at the very bottom. Next, at number 36, we have Alternative Histories. This episode is fine, I guess. It's one of the comedic episodes that doesn't really hit. This episode looks at an alternative history to World War II and a certain group associated with that war that I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say the name of on YouTube, which is BS, by the way, and I also can't say the full word of BS because I might get demonetized. I digress. I think if they would have done a different historical event, it could have gone over a little bit better. Not saying the episode offended me by by any means. It's just Next at number 35, I'm putting Helping Hand. I completely forgot about this episode's existence. Needless to say, it's probably the most forgettable episode in the series. It's like a 10-minute pun. An astronaut goes on a spacewalk and gets stranded. That's all. I can't even picture what this episode looks like. I did return to a few episodes and watch the new season to prepare for this video, but I remember not thinking much of this episode when I first watched it. Next, I'm putting Ice. On an icy planet, two brothers face a dangerous rite of passage. I feel like this episode had a lot of potential considering it does actually have a point to it, but for some reason it just didn't live up to it. It's kind of hard to explain why I don't like this episode, but it seems like the community does agree with me because this is the lowest rated episode in the entire series. Ice explores bravery and the desire to belong. It definitely makes that point pretty clear, but in a below average sort of way. Okay, now we have our first hot take of the video. At number 33, I am putting The Secret War. I ranked all of the season 1 episodes back on TikTok a few years ago, and when I put this one low on my ranking, people were upset. So if you like this episode, I want to hear why in the comments because I just don't get it. I literally just rewatched this episode maybe an hour before I started shooting, just to make sure I wasn't lying to myself from the past. But yeah, I mean, the episode's fine. I think it would have worked better as a video game instead of a Love, Death, and Robots episode. Soviet soldiers battle supernatural forces in the Siberian wilderness during World War II. Upon rewatch of the episode, I did note that The Secret War technically has everything a solid plot needs, but it just didn't have enough time to deliver. It's just under about 20 minutes, which is generally the cap for Love, Death, and Robot episodes, but it still felt rushed. I think if you're really trying to search for a point in all of these episodes, you could say the moral to the story of The Secret War lies in its title. I can't imagine how many battles and wars have been fought in secrecy throughout history. And obviously, from what we know, this episode did not happen, but I'm sure there are some fights across history that have been erased, whether it be erased from the history books or were just never documented in the first place. Next, we have The Tall Grass, a hugely wasted potential episode considering how unique the animation style is, but definitely not as maddening as Sucker of Souls. A train passenger investigates mysterious lights in a forest of tall grass after the train stalls. It's just a monster episode. Super predictable, not super entertaining. Next, we have 400 Boys. Attack on Titan, but worse. Post-apocalyptic survivors fight giant babies. You'll get it when you see it. I did really enjoy the animation style. However, we've seen it 2 other times. Once with a previously mentioned episode, Ice, and another with Zima Blue, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. Fuck. Face is gonna be red. A problem with a lot of these monster episodes is they don't even try to establish what's going on. They just show a build-up to a fight scene, and then there's the fight scene, which, if you know anything about writing, you have to establish stakes and make you care about the characters for fight scenes to work. If you don't, it's just gonna be a mishmash of kicking and screaming. And yeah, there was definitely intrigue in this episode, but not enough considering how short it was. I feel like I've been hating on season 4, specifically because it wasn't very good. But a lot of the season 4 episodes were much, much shorter than the other seasons, which is another reason why I feel like there was probably a budget cut. I'm getting over a cold. Next at number 30, we have another episode from season 4. In fact, we're going to be talking about episodes from season 4 for a little while. We have Smart Appliances, Stupid Owners. Smart household appliances share their grievances about their human owners in a mockumentary style of film. Clearly a parody of something like The Office or Parks and Rec. And while I do think the animation style was quite solid, the humor, once again, it's the type of humor that makes you chuckle for like a second, but by no means are you laughing out loud. Like the title of the episode may hint toward, humans have the tendency to buy, assuming every purchase will make their lives better, but this episode shows that it don't. Next we have For He Can Creep. In 1757 London, a poet's cat battles the devil to keep him from taking his soul. Not necessarily a bad episode, but I will admit this is the last episode in season 4, and at this point I was just so exhausted from watching episode after episode of boredom. Maybe my opinion would change if I watched this episode first. I do want to commend the cat animation. As someone who has been around a many cat, I almost feel like maybe they put a mocap suit on a real cat to capture the movement of the animated cats in this episode. But once again, in the end, it just turned into one big fight scene between the cats and demons. I feel like an episode like this, especially with the unique animation, they could have presented something more profound here, especially since Love, Death, and Robots does have a tendency to put their most profound episodes at the very end of the season. But nope, not really much to say here, except for maybe highlighting the importance of loyalty and power of art, which is something that I do talk about here a lot on this channel, but they could have executed it better. I know we're pretty high up on the list and I'm still kind of hating. There's a lot of slop. There's also a lot of fantastic episodes, and we'll get there, but not yet. Now let's talk about the other large thing. Another episode about a talking cat. This was the first talking cat episode, and I don't really think we need 2 episodes in one season about a talking cat. I love cats, but come on, can we branch out a little bit? A scheming house cat partners with a robotic butler to end their human overlords and rule the world. By no means is the humor in this episode rolling on the ground funny, but I do think we are kind of at the point where the comedy does work. It's the perfect amount of over-the-top ridiculous that works in its favor. And while the animation style is similar to The Dump, which I wasn't a huge fan of, at least the episode was funny. I also want to point out that this technically could be a prequel to another episode in the series we have not talked about, 3 Robots. Next, we have Kill Team Kill. This is just a better version of Sucker of Souls. The characters and acting are a little bit better, but there still isn't much of a point to it besides kill the monster. US soldiers face off against a cybernetic grizzly bear. The animation style works in its favor. I think Kill Team Kill has a pretty solid balance of comedy and seriousness, something that Sucker of Souls just could not get right. It almost feels like this was an episode trying to make up for the mistakes of that past episode. It probably isn't even the same director. I'm not sure. I still don't love the episode, but it's not terrible. Guess what? We have another season 4 episode, Spider Rose. Following the season 4 theme of doing unnecessary sequels, this is an indirect sequel to the season 3 episode, Swarm. A cybernetic woman seeks vengeance against an alien race for killing her husband. That is, until she finds a cute little alien baby. I think the point of this episode is just to show that revenge and violence is not worth it. But frankly, this episode just made me mad. I don't want to spoil it here, but if you go watch it, when you see the ending, you'll understand. I think there are a lot more stories that do the same premise more justice. And I know you're probably thinking, Jack, this is a series of short stories. Of course, there's another story out there that does it better, had more time to bake. And while that may be true, some of the episodes near the top of this list nail their premise perfectly in less than 20 minutes. So I'm gonna hate a little bit. Next at number 25, we have Automated Customer Service, another comedic episode which for the most part does work. Hard to put it any higher though. An elderly woman battles her malfunctioning smart vacuum. Once again, a take on the overdependence on technology and the pitfalls of automation. I also appreciate it for its unique animation style. I'm by no means holding this against episodes, but I really appreciate it when an episode has a unique animation style as opposed to all of the other animation. You could say that maybe there's only so many different animation styles that you can do. I would disagree though. We've seen so many different kinds of animation over the years. So why are we doing repeats? The next episode we were talking about is How Zeke Got Religion. During World War II, there's a lot of World War II episodes. A soldier encounters supernatural forces. There's a lot of supernatural episodes too that challenge his beliefs. How Zeke Got Religion is an episode that is a commentary on why certain people will follow religion, unlike another episode from season 4 we have not discussed yet, which I think is against religion. I can appreciate that within the same season we get a commentary on both sides of the story here. This episode shows how religion can eradicate fear in the human condition, how it's much easier to live a worthy life when everything is explained for you and set out for you. It's easier to be courageous in the face of death when you believe it's not the end, and that when someone passes away, they go to a better place. I'm not going to talk about my religious and spiritual beliefs in this video, but I do think all of that is valid, and there are some people who probably are better following in a religion. Maybe not religious organizations, but maybe just a belief in something greater. The monster episodes don't typically work for me, but I think this one was pretty solid. It had a nice build-up and characterization, and the fight scene, which was more like a slaughter scene, at the end was well executed. The monster design was also fairly creative, taking inspiration from biblically accurate angels, and they even weaved some historical accuracy into this episode as well, because a certain group of people that are often associated with World War II had a strong belief in the occult, which we see in this episode. At number 23, I put All Throughout the House. This is a Christmas episode where we see Santa isn't exactly a human, but is instead a monstrosity. Not a complex episode, but definitely charming. Next, we have Golgotha, which is the other season 4 episode that is anti-religion. It is also the second live action episode. The CGI in this episode is very solid. A human priest confronts alien missionaries in a religious debate. Whether you believe this or not, I think the argument that this episode is trying to say is that belief in deities like God is based on a lack of knowledge and understanding of the world around us. The aliens that have come to Earth see a dolphin and, according to their religion, deem it as a god. But the human priest knows better, that it is simply a marine animal. But that doesn't stop the alien from waging war to protect this dolphin from the humans who they deem as unworthy of being in the presence of their god, therefore being a criticism of religious war, aka often war over nothing, especially because historical religious wars are fought against opposing sides that believe in the same things but just use different words for them. Cause like, I believe we should protect the dolphins, but I'm not going to church every day worshiping dolphins. And while I do think the conversation in this episode is brilliant, I think it could have used a longer length. It got its point across, but it was just way too short. Okay, at number 21, I put Lucky 13. A battle pilot forms an emotional bond with her dropship that is rumored to be cursed. I think the storytelling here is pretty solid. The motivations are set, the acting is pretty solid, and shows how we humans can be sentimental even to inanimate objects. Next, we are talking about shapeshifters. Two U.S. Marines, who are also werewolves, face prejudice and combat in a war-torn region. This episode is obviously a commentary on discrimination, really of any kind, but also the internal struggle of nature versus duty. We are getting to that point in the list where I don't have much to criticize when it comes to the story. There is definitely better out there than shapeshifters, but I did really feel for the characters here. I especially related to their anger towards injustice, and because of this connection to the characters, I actually felt the fight scene at the end. A fight scene of which was very well choreographed. Number 19, I am putting Mason's Rats. A farmer combats intelligent rats invading his home with escalating measures. Even though this is a comedic episode, I think it has a beautiful message to it. Basically, Mason continues to up the ante by killing rats with advanced technology. I guess you could see this as a spoiler, so if that bothers you, sorry, skip to the next section. Timestamps in the description. But in the end, Mason ends up feeling bad for the rats, seeing that they just want to live peaceful lives, but have to escalate to war because of the dangers to their society. Mason ends up teaming up with the rats to take down the robot that Mason sicked on them. The episode shows the possibility of codependence with a culture that we do not understand by seeing the humanity in one another, even seeing the humanity in the rats. You can see that as a coexistence with other species, but also a coexistence with other human cultures. We don't all have to be the same, and that is why I like this episode as much as I do. Next, I am putting Fish Night, which I think is a hot take because this is probably one of the least favorites, at least in this season. Season 1, to be exact. Two salesmen experience a surreal encounter in the desert. If you've been around on this channel for a little bit, you know how much I love slower paced, philosophical stories that have more of a reliance on characters as opposed to plot. And And this episode really is just one scene. This is a contemplative piece about the mysteries of the universe, and it also has such gorgeous animation. Now we have my favorite episode from season 4, The Screaming of the Tyrannosaur. Hunger Games in space with dinosaurs. But it's not just a fight scene. I mean, it is just a fight scene, but it's also a commentary on the wage gap. In this episode, we see that love and community is more important than power and money. That a connection to those around us, specifically a connection to nature, is what will save us in the end. Okay, another hot take. At number 16, I am putting Jabaro. I know that this is a fan favorite episode, and this time I actually get it. And I know this feels low, and really the only reason I'm putting it this low is it's kind of a hard watch. It's very abstract, and understanding the point of it, you really gotta dig deep. A deaf conquistador encounters a siren who is immune to her presence because of his deafness. At its core, Jabaro is a commentary on greed, desire, and exploitation. Two beings drawn to each other not out of love but possession. The knight's deafness shields him from the siren's call, making him a metaphor for how colonizers often ignore the cries of those they are enslaving. The siren's beautiful gold plating and dance is a representation of how desire can destroy with the wrong intentions. This may be the most philosophical and also historically accurate episodes in the series because it goes even further than what we see on screen. The episode explores the Spanish conquest of the time in a brutally realistic yet fanatical way. And while I do love it, I have it this low just because of how abstract it is. Abstract art is not bad by any means. I actually love many forms of abstract art, but we are this high up on the list and I am needing to nitpick a little bit. I didn't explain my point well enough when I was recording, so basically what I was trying to say is, while I do love the episode and its message, because of its abstractness, it's not exactly an enjoyable watch. You can see that even with the cinematography. It's harsh on the eyes. Every single shot makes you want to look away. And while I think it is a beautiful and important piece of art, there are many other episodes that I would rather return to. Number 15 being Snow in the Desert. I desperately want this one to be a video game. An albino man on a desert planet is hunted for his regenerative abilities. After a long bout of isolation, he finds comfort in connection. This episode very much focuses on the search for connection, but also with the flaws of immortality, something that no human being can necessarily relate to. However, many of us do desire immortality. The problem then relies with if there are a couple of people who are immortal and others who are not, that means the immortal beings will outlive their loved ones who are not, eventually leading to a natural form of isolation. Ultimately, I think this episode is a commentary on survivor's guilt. Next, we have The Very Pulse of the Machine, which is another episode that isn't generally favored in the series, but I personally love. An astronaut drowns her partner's lifeless body across a moon, experiencing hallucinations. The hallucinations that she experiences are left ambiguous on whether or not they are real. Once again, I love those slower episodes that focus on philosophical questions, and this episode focuses on the question of consciousness. While this episode does not focus on clones, it does bring up the common moral question within the practice of cloning, or at least copying one's brain and putting it into another. Are your memories and your neural pathways in your brain who you are, or is it your body? Or maybe it's a combination of the two. If you had your brain taken from one body and put it into another, are you immortal, or is the original you gone forever? As I said, that's not a spoiler for this episode. That's just the general idea here. I know I haven't talked about the animation in a while, but at this point, the animation is gonna be pretty solid. We're almost to the top 10. And with this episode, I fell in love with the animation first and the narrative second. I know a lot of y'all are gonna be confused that I put this episode this high, but at number 13, I have When the Yogurt Took Over. This is definitely an episode you could say should have just been a YouTube video, but considering I liked it, it's fine. Sentient yogurt takes over the world. The reason an episode like this works and an episode like, say, The Night of the Mini Dead doesn't is because of its pacing and reliance on dialogue. Those miniature figurine episodes don't really technically have any dialogue, but When the Yogurt Took Over set stakes, characters, motivations, all of the stuff that you should have in a plot. And for me, this is my kind of sense of humor. I have not watched the episode in a little bit. Maybe I wouldn't find it as funny if I rewatched it, but I do remember the last few times seeing it, I enjoyed it pretty thoroughly. Also, this episode had the Ohio trend before it was a trend. Shout out Love, Death, and Robots. They are true trendsetters. I hope they're only trendsetters in the comedic episodes, though. Once again, another episode that I'm guessing people will be surprised I have it this high. At number 12, I am talking Swarm. Two scientists infiltrate a space hive mind, one with the intention of understanding the hive mind while the other plans to exploit it. Swarm, I believe, is about how humans exploit nature for their own self-preservation, how they care more about themselves as living creatures than any other being. I also think it's a little bit of a commentary about the misunderstanding of sentience, because supposedly this hive mind is not sentient, yet they can speak, have their own language, and strategize. It backs up the scientific principle that sentience is just a human construct to make us feel smarter than the other animals on this planet. Who's to say a crow or an ant can't contemplate its existence? We haven't exactly asked them, and that characteristic is what defines sentience. I'm a big science buff, so I was a pretty big fan of this episode. I think maybe it's just a little misunderstood. And it is also kind of short, so I get it. Next, we have In Vaulted Halls Entombed. This is Love, Death, and Robots' take on the Call of Cthulhu, but in a more modern setting. US soldiers encounter an ancient entity within a cave system in Afghanistan. I believe this episode morally aligns itself with Call of Cthulhu, but is also a commentary on blind duty and loyalty. It also probably has one of the more horrific endings. I won't say it has the most horrific ending though, which we will talk about a little later, but before that, let's crack the top 10 with The Drowned Giant, a slow and quiet look into the human experience. In fact, it's probably the slowest and quietest episode in the series, and what I think is an underappreciated episode. The corpse of a giant washes ashore, making itself available to the public. The Drowned Giant is about the diminishing of bodily autonomy and how something extraordinary is quickly forgotten in the eyes of media. We as humans have such short attention spans these days, yet we oftentimes try to find the value in everything, which in a late-stage capitalist society will eventually lead to exploitation. You could say that it doesn't matter because this giant is dead, but I mean, whatever happened to the shame of desecrating a corpse? This episode is not just about the giant, it's not just surface level. It's a look into the nasty aspects of humanity. On to more philosophy. At number 9, I'm putting Pop Squad. My favorite episode of season 2, a detective forces population control in a world where immortality is possible. This episode has a lot of emotion packed into such a short amount of time. Pop Squad looks at how if immortality was ever achieved, the rich and powerful would use it just as another tool to enforce their control on society, extending societal inequality even further than it already is at. A critique of the obsession over youth and the control of our lives, and the sacrifices we justify to preserve our privileged way of life. At number 8, we have another episode that people don't like as much as I do. We have Blind Spot. I really want a full series of this episode. However, if you're like me in that aspect, go check out Cyberpunk Edgerunners because it kind of is that, even though that is also just a mini-series with 10 episodes. A team of cyborg thieves attempts a high-speed heist on a heavily armored convoy. I love Blind Spot as much as I do because of the characterization. I've always said there are two kinds of stories. There are stories that focus mostly on characters, and then there are stories that focus mostly on plot. On paper, the plot of Blind Spot is pretty basic, but where it shines is the acting and character writing. A story with an interesting plot but boring characters is going to be a boring story, while a story with interesting characters but a boring plot has a chance to be a thrilling experience. This is because the characters are the people we relate to within the story. It's how we are able to put ourselves into the narrative. And the characters in this short 9-minute episode are so well fleshed out in such a brilliantly short amount of time. Next, at number 7, we have Beyond the Aquila Rift. point. I am gonna say a minor spoiler for this episode, so if that bothers you, skip ahead. A crew awakens unexpectedly on their spaceship far into the depths of space. It's clear that something is wrong, but at first it just seems like a malfunction of hardware. But then we learn they are in a much more horrific situation. This is the episode that has the most horrific ending. And while I will not spoil the ending itself, I will say the placement of this episode in the series is genius. So the original order of the show started with an episode called Sonny's Edge, which we'll talk about later. However, now the current order of the episode on Netflix starts with 3 Robots, which is obviously an episode about robots, which enforces the themes of this series being technology. The second episode is Beyond the Aquila Rift, and because of the name of the series and also the problems early on in the episode, we assume that the twist or the explanation is going to be tied to technology. But that is not the case at all, which is what enforces the twist even better. This episode is all about illusion. And if you were to have the knowledge that everything around you is not real, but you were happy, would you be okay with ignoring the fact that it's all fiction? The whole moral compass of the Matrix series. At number 6, we are talking about Sonny's Edge. Another episode I am begging to be made into a video game. In a dystopian future, a woman partakes in a beast match to the death, leveraging her traumatic past as a weapon. Sonny's Edge explores the empowerment of your trauma and how you can leverage the experiences throughout your life to your own advantage. It's got a nice little twist at the end. The fight scenes are brilliant. And as I said throughout this video, I love the characters as well. At number 5, I am putting The Witness. This one has my favorite animation style in the entire series. When I originally made my ranking of season 1 over on TikTok, I put The Witness at number 1. And that's not to say this is my favorite episode in season 1 anymore. I have demoted it a little bit because I think the plot is a tad predictable. I saw the twist coming, but that doesn't change the fact that I think the twist is brilliant. I don't typically hold seeing the twist coming against a story unless it's painfully obvious to the point that I'm getting irritated with the characters. Similar to how many of the episodes in this series is just one long fight scene, The Witness is just one long chase scene. A woman witnesses a murder in real time and then is caught by the murderer. She is then chased by said murderer throughout a neon-lit city. That's all I'll say about the plot without spoiling it. However, the moral dilemma here is looking at the cycle of violence and how our perception of reality can change everything. Now, if you are a fan of counting, you may have realized at the very beginning of this video I said there are 44 episodes, but you see there are actually technically 45 episodes, and that is why at number 4 I am putting the episode 3 Robots, which actually has 2 episodes to it, but I am putting them in one spot. That is because they are of the same quality and for the most part are a continuation of each other. The first episode, just titled 3 Robots, is in season 1, but the sequel, which is titled Exit Strategies, is the opener of season 3. 3 robots tour a post-apocalyptic city, laughing over the stupidity of humans as they observe the remnants of their broken society. This episode is my favorite comedic episode for a number of reasons. Firstly, of which being the characterization between the 3 robots. I think their chemistry is really well executed, but laughing at this episode could almost be seen as a trauma response, considering these 3 robots are going through and pointing out all of the flaws from human civilization and their inevitable downfall. Flaws that, of course, we see rampant in our everyday society. My favorite kind of comedy is often a commentary on the human condition. I like a little bit of existential dread in my humor, and that is what we get here. I also think Netflix's decision to reorder season 1 and put this as the season opener was for the best, just considering the name of the series. And while I don't typically like sequels, especially when it comes to anthology series, I think Exit Strategies worked really well, just considering the popularity of this episode episode and how well it ties to the overall themes. Cracking the top 3, we have my favorite episode from season 3, Bad Traveling. This is the highest rated episode in the community, and for good reason. Any compliment that I have given to any of these episodes below it can be applied to this episode and also the episodes that I have listed above this one. A sailor negotiates with a monstrous crab who has taken refuge on his ship, forcing him into a moral dilemma. Brilliant plot and character writing, but also such a tense situation. I could see this episode being turned into a full-fledged movie, and it being extended into that length would not ruin it. Unlike many of the episodes in this series, which often have one or maybe no twists, Bad Traveling has numerous twists, all of which land remarkably well. The situation that our main character sees himself in is easy to relate to, and I found myself asking the question of whether I would make the same decisions or not. Bad Traveling showcases the complexities of making ethical choices under pressure, and how 9 times out of 10 humans will choose self-preservation over what is morally just. In this short 20 minutes episode, we see the difficulties of leadership and how often the people who strive for power are not the ones who deserve it. A natural paradox. I kept going back and forth between my top 2 spots of which one I wanted to put at number 1. And if you ask me on a different day, I may make a different decision. But today at number 2, we are not talking about Bad Traveling. We are talking about Good Hunting. Probably the most beautiful animation in the series, and also an animation style we have only seen for this episode. A bond forms between 2 opposing sides, a shape-shifting young girl and a young boy who is taught to hunt these shapeshifters, set within a rapidly changing world of the Industrial Revolution. This episode is probably the most graphic episode in the series, so be warned if you are sensitive to really any triggering content. Good Hunting is a roller coaster plot that focuses on the clashes between tradition and modernization. With a similar message to Mason's Rats, but less obvious, this episode has a strong connection to the bond between this young boy and girl who were bred to hate each other, but eventually become friends through the empathy of one another, even after one of them hurt the other. So if you have been paying attention, you know what my number 1 episode is, and that would be Zima Blue. In the new order of season 1, this is the finale, but of course it was not originally. A renowned artist reveals the origin of his obsession over a specific shade of blue. Zima Blue is one of the more philosophical episodes, with a breathtaking style of animation. As I said earlier in the video, we have seen this animation style a couple of times, but I think the way it was used in this episode worked the best with its slow pace. In an episode like 400 Boys, this art style almost made me a little nauseous. However, Zima Blue is much slower and it doesn't have any fight scenes. And because of that, it is easier to appreciate the beautiful shading of the colors, specifically Zima Blue. I relate to the message of Zima Blue probably the most out of any episode in this entire series. It explores the search for the meaning of life, purpose, and identity. Something that I think almost every human being has struggled with one way or another in their lives. This is the only episode in the series that actually made me cry. And I can admit that. It's harder to connect to characters and plot when the episodes are so short, but that ending was so heartbreakingly beautiful. So that was it. That was my ranking of every single Love, Death, and Robots episode. But really quick, I'm going to give you my season ranking. There are only 4 seasons. And if it's not already obvious, my least favorite at number 4 would be season 4. It was clearly more focused on the art of animation as opposed to storytelling, but it was pretty clear to me that they got a budget cut for this season. The entire thing kind of felt like filler, except for maybe the dinosaur episode, even if many of them explored important moral themes. I also noticed on average, the episodes were much shorter than all of the other episodes in the series. Then at number 3, I would put season 2. Season 2 overall is pretty solid, but the majority of the episodes were a little bit lower on this ranking. It was just harder for them to go up against the other seasons. At number 2, I am putting season 3. Overall, fairly consistent with a couple of duds here and there. And then at at number 1, we have season 1, which has the most episodes out of the series. It has 18 episodes, which is double the amount of the other seasons. And ultimately, that propels it up to the top for me. It's not super consistent like season 3, but it has some of the best episodes in the series. If you are still here, thank you so much for watching the video in its entirety. I post a video every other which includes other TV show videos. So if you liked this one, you might like some of the others. And if you want to see those, subscribing and clicking the bell is the way to do that. Or you could click my channel, but that's boring. But regardless, please remember, don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do with your life. Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.